guys, welcome to Mrs. G's Sewing Space. Today we're going to learn how to make sock monkeys. I'm glad you're able to join me today. I know I've been promising this video for quite a while, and so today we're going to be making an armful of sock monkeys. These are 4 sock monkeys that I have made from dollar store socks that I have shown you that I had purchased some time ago in prior vlogs that I had. So today's the day. I'm going to take you step by step on how I put these sock monkeys together. Now when you go out there and look on the internet for instructions, the instructions are basically the same. There are just certain differences that some people like that I don't, and some people like the way I do it and some people don't. You know, it all depends on how you like to sew and how your hand sewing is. There's a lot of hand sewing on these, but you also get to use a sewing machine too. So I hope you guys like the video that I have, and throw some comments down below and let me know what you think at the end. The first thing you need to do is to pick out socks that do not have a one-way design on them. The socks that I chose all have designs on them that will end up being upside down on the finished monkeys, but I'm okay with that. So once you got your socks picked out, and these are knee-high socks for the long arms and legs, because that's what you're going to get, you're going to take your socks and you're going to flip them inside out. And I went ahead and just flipped all of them inside out, all 4 pairs of socks, and then you're going to start lining them up. Here you will see me fiddling around with the pair of socks, and I have flipped them inside out, and the sock at the top has been flipped inside out and laid on its side, so the heel is facing the side and it's lined up and laying flat. The sock that I'm working on right now, I have laid flat with the heel facing up so that the crease lines are lying one on top of the other. This sock is going to be your body and your legs, and the other sock lying flat on its side is going to be your arms, your ears, your tail, and your mouth. So you can see right now I have just traced using a ruler down the middle of the sock, and that is going to be where I cut. And I am now drawing the curves at the bottom, which are going to be my feet. And all the stitching and showing you where to sew is going to be later on in the video. So this is a close-up of the sock that I just marked, so you can see what's going to be 2 legs and the body, and there the heel is going to be the bottom of the monkey, the butt. So I'm going to set that aside, and the second sock is going to come out, and I'm going to start marking it up for the rest of the body parts. So I'm going to go ahead and mark where I will need a cut for the arms. And I'm just going to eyeball kind of down the center where I would split for the arms. And then I'm going to draw the curves at the end. I'm out of shot right here, but I'm just drawing the curves just like I did on the body for the feet. Now on the foot of the sock, I'm marking the heel of this sock is going to be my mouth of the monkey once we're at that point. So that's where I'll need to cut, and you won't sew around the mouth, you're just going to cut it out. And now I'm going to mark out my ears. That's like the perfect ear right there. And then I make my second ear, which is not so perfect. And then here is my tail. So I'm going to cut there, but I'm going to sew here. So there's my tail, my 2 ears, my mouth, and that's where I'm going to cut for my legs. So this is me just sewing all the socks up. Before I cut anything, I do all my stitching ahead of time so that it's a lot easier to sew everything together while the socks are still whole than it is to cut the pieces out and then sew them all up. Stitched for the tail. So now I'm going to grab my scissors and I'm going to cut out the pieces. So I'm cutting straight across the top there for the arms. And then I'm going to cut out my tail. So if you see I only have that one line there, I'm going to keep the side open so that I can flip it inside out. So there's no stitching there at the end. And I'm cutting close enough to the seam so that I have extra seam allowance, but I can get through everything else. So now I'm going to cut out my ears. I'm going to keep it between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch between the two. And your ears will be enclosed. We'll cut those open later when we stuff them. I'm going to cut out my mouth. Now this is important. You need to make sure your heel is lined up and that you have plenty extra cut around the mouth because you're going to turn it in when you stitch it onto the body. So there we go. I got my ears, my tail, and my mouth. And I'm going to cut out my arms right now. So I'm going to cut around the curves as I'm out of shot right here. And I'm cutting down the channel that I left in between each arm so that I can separate the two. And there's still seam allowance enough that the stitches will have something to hold on to. If you cut too close to the seam, or if you cut through the seam, when you go to stuff the arms or legs or tail or whatever, you're going to pop that seam because of the stuffing. Everything will stretch out. So you need to make sure that you leave plenty of room in the gap between your arms and between your legs to allow you to have a decent seam allowance. So here I am cutting, once again off camera. I realized I was off camera, cutting around the paws and the legs of the body. So this is the body and the legs of the monkey, and I'm just going to cut through the channel to separate out the legs. And I'm going to cut right where the stitching ends, and then I'm going to cut around the paws. So there we go. Now I have two legs, a body, so there we go. So I have a tail, a mouth, two ears, two arms, my body, and my legs. Now there's a teeny weeny little hole right there, and what you're going to do, you're going to cut a little deeper into that hole, and that's where you're going to flip your body out and flip your legs out. And then once all that's flipped out, that's where you're also going to stuff the body. So here I am figuring out what needs to be flipped and what doesn't. I had previously flipped out all the other monkeys that I had and their parts, so I left this one for last. But I'm just going to show you a few ways to be able to flip out the pieces. Now remember, this is a stretch fabric. Socks are made out of a knit, which means there's a lot of stretch to it, so you have some forgiveness when you are making things. So right now I'm using a tool that is usually found in a bag of stuffing, and it's just a small thin wooden dowel. You can also use a chopstick or a barbecue skewer or pencil to help flip around the legs and the body and things if you need it. Because this is a stretchy material, you can use your fingers as well. You just need to be careful when you are using this, because as you're pushing against the fabric, you don't want the dowel to push through the fabric, because then you'll just poke a hole in it, and that's a repair job on the way to completing your project. For this next arm, I'm using just my thumb. Like I said, this is a stretchy material, so I can just use my thumb, and I'm just pushing through the bottom where the paw is, pushing it up and out, and gathering the rest of the fabric around the base of my thumb and just pulling it out. And now I have the body. Now remember, we made a small slit in between the legs, just past the legs, to be able to make a hole big enough to flip out everything. So if it's still too small and you're not able to flip the body or the legs through, you can make another small snip. You don't want too big of a snip, because you don't want it to stretch out too much, but make a small snip to make it a little bit bigger if you need it, and then take your time and flip out your legs and your body. Now at this point I'm going to speed up the process just a little bit so that you guys can get an idea of what I'm doing. I am taking all my stuffing and I'm now stuffing my tail. And there's a trick to stuffing so that you can stuff it in there and still have a smooth body or have a smooth leg or arms or whatever. I have yet to figure it out. So I just stuff small bits in there, and I try to keep it as smooth as possible. I try not to stuff it in there too hard, because that will definitely cause knobs or bubbles or just not smoothness. I'm not even sure what you would call it. But if you take a little bit and you stuff it in there and you push it into the very end and push it in tight, not only it stretches out that sock, but it causes the stuffing to, like, I don't know, harden up maybe, or just get knobby. I can't think of any other way to explain it. And so I tried multiple ways to stuff it in there without it bumbling up and being all bumpy and lumpy and everything. So it just takes practice, it takes time. I mean, my sock monkeys aren't perfect by any means, and honestly, I don't expect anybody to produce perfect sock monkeys unless you have managed to stuff it by a machine. So take your time and every once in a while work the stuffing around, work it out, roll it in between your fingers, your tail or arms or whatever, and try to even it out as best you can.
Now this is how I stuffed the body. I took small pieces of stuffing and I pulled them apart, little bits, and I laid them flat on my cutting board into a rectangle. And I knew it was going to compress when I put it into the body, so I did my best to try to make it as even as possible, but also fill in the places where I thought it would have less stuffing once I've got it compressed into the body. And I did it this way because I felt it would be easier than trying to stuff the body the same way I stuffed the legs and the arms. I was afraid of having a super lumpy monkey, and I figured this would probably be the best way to use the stuffing to be able to get a smooth body. And it worked to a point. I still had some lumpiness, but it wasn't as bad as if I had taken like small handfuls and stuffed it that way. So once I felt I had everything filled out like I wanted it to, I just laid it up, and as you can see here, I was measuring against my sock monkey to see that, so I could make sure that it would fit. And I mushed it all together, squeezed it tight, and then now here I am taking the tube that I just created and rolled up and stuffing it into the body. And I have to say, this worked out a lot better than I expected it to. I mean, I still got some lumps, but it wasn't near as lumpy as it could have been. So once I managed to get everything worked out and evened out as much as I could, I took the extra stuffing that I had and put it in to those empty joints by the bottom of the monkey to the top of the leg. So I didn't stuff the leg up as far as I could have, so I just taken stuffing there and matching it up so that it was all the way up. Now at this point it is time to sew on the arms and the legs and start putting the monkey together and sewing up the seams. So I'm quickly rubbing my thread. I take my thread and I rub it between my hands, just run it through my hands 2 or 3 times to try to work out the kinks before I knot it. And it makes it easier when you're hand sewing. So now we're going to do a whole bunch of hand sewing because that's how we attach the arms and the legs to the monkey, and we have to sew up the crotch line as well. So right now I'm taking all my arms and my legs and my tails and I'm tucking in the cut ends to the inside and pinning them shut. And I've done the same thing to the crotch. It's not completely turned in and pinned. I'll do that as I sew, but right now my crotch has been pinned together so the stuffing's no longer popping out, and I'll start to sew all that together. So here I am, I've got my needle and thread, and the same stitch that I used to stitch the tops of the arms and legs shut is the same stitch that I use to shut the crotch, to clean up the inside of the crotch and to close that hole. And that will be demonstrated a little further on in the video. Now remember, you also want to take your time and don't rush, because if you rush you make mistakes, and mistakes that could easily be avoided is usually what happens when you're tired or when you're rushing. Okay, so his crotch is now all sewn up, and I'm using this same stitch to stitch his tail shut. And I'm using an extra long thread so that when I'm done stitching his tail shut, I still have enough thread attached to his tail to attach the tail to the body. So right now I'm trying to figure out where I need to put the tail at so that he can sit up and be nice. And I'm taking a couple of stitches from the body and then a couple of stitches from the top of the tail and sewing them together. And then I'm going to flip the tail over and do the same type of stitching from the body to the bottom of the tail. So the seam from the top of the tail is hidden into the body. And then I'm going to go back and do some back stitching across the tail in the body, and that'll help. I've closed the seam of the arm or the tail, and I'm using the same thread to now attach it to the body, and a seam across the top and across the bottom for extra security. And then when I get to the end, I just do some quick back stitches across the length of the arm or into the body, whichever floats my boat at the time, and that'll help secure the thread. So now it's time for the ears. So when you made the stitches and sewn the ears, they were sewn on a fold. So now you need a snip, a small snip into the fold, and then you flip them, cut them open on the fold, flip them inside out, and now you can stuff them. And then you turn in the cut ends and pin them shut. And then you will do the ears the same way you did the tail and the arms. So here I am. I unfortunately cut this mouth too small. Because the heel is a solid color, I should have cut a larger sewing allowance around the colored heel. But because I had my sock folded in half, I didn't realize I had it was folded slightly crooked. So on the side that I cut, it looked like I had plenty of seam allowance, but on the back side it didn't. So on this particular money, I had to take that into account. So I folded under everything that I could, and I had to play and rearrange until everything was looking as good as it could, and make it look nice with the folded edges as well as with the actual raw cut edge, because I didn't have enough to fold over, or under, I should say. I didn't have enough to fold under. So here I am, working my thread again, running it between my hands a couple of times to get the kinks out and knotting it. And I start not quite in the middle of the bottom of the mouth, but just off to the side, and I sew the same way I did everything else, a couple of stitches from the body and a couple of stitches from the mouth, and pull it tight. A couple of stitches from the body, a couple of stitches from the mouth, and I pull it tight. And I do that all the way around the mouth, but I do give some extra security stitches at the corners so that things won't pull away from there. So here's a close-up shot. I'm having a hard time talking tonight. a close-up shot of how I do my stitches. So I take a couple of stitches from the body, a couple of stitches through the fold where the mouth is, and pull it tight. And that gives it a secure stitch all the way around. So they don't have to be too tiny, but it's a secure stitch. But I do it through the fold, and I just pull it through. So here I am, speeded up to get through this monkey as quick as I can so that I can go to bed. No, not really. Well, I mean, I do want to go to bed, but, you know. Okay, so anyways. So here's the corner. So I'm just taking some extra stitches there at the corner to secure the corner and continue stitching on the rest of the monkey's mouth. So here I am near the end of the mouth, and I left a gap, so I haven't gone all the way across, and now I'm going to take my stuffing and I'm going to fill in the monkey's mouth so that it pokes out. And you don't want to stuff it too hard or too full, because then, you know, you don't want to pull the stitching, but you want to make it, you know, give them a happy mug. And then once you're happy with how well you stuffed it, then you continue stitching and close up that gap. And I'm using the same stitching I've always used, a couple from the body, a couple from the fold of the mouth, and pull it tight. And if anything pops out, you just tuck it back in and you keep on going. I'm sorry for being slightly out of focus here. I thought I was in focus. But if you need to go back and review my stitching, you can go, you know, just rewind a couple of seconds until you're back. Okay, so here I am, finally getting to the ears. Now that I have the mouth and the arms and the tail sewn on, all I have to do is add the ears. So same stitching that I did for the closing of my arms and tail, going from the inside to the outside, back and forth. Inside, I take a stitch from the inside and go from the outside, and it just kind of wraps around. I like that stitch the best. A lot of instructions say whip stitch, but I'm not overly fond of the whip stitch. I'd rather do it this way. So when I get to the end, I start doing a stab stitch. So I'm just stabbing it through the fabric, and I'm pulling it tight because I want to have that indication there that the monkey has an inner ear. So just straight up, straight down, straight up, straight down. Just pulling the thread tight so that it shows a little indents there. And then I secure my stitching by doing a couple of stitches at the bottom, and I have my thread long enough that I can continue using it to attach the ear to the monkey. And I do it the same way, a couple of stitches from the body, a couple of stitches from the top of the monkey's ear, and then I'll flip it over and do the same. So I use the same stitch and the same process to attach the ears, the arms, and the tail. So see right there, my needle, I was pointing to the seam that I had stitched, and as I attach the ear to the monkey, I'm covering that actual stitch by stitching from the body to the either side of that line of stitching. So the original stitching that closes the ear is hidden against the body of the monkey, so you can't see it. And then I do some back stitches across the back of the ear to secure my thread, and there you go. And this also helps the ears to stand out and be cute. Now here I've got a ton of buttons, and I'm here trying to figure out what buttons work best for my monkeys. And you don't have to use buttons. I use buttons just because I have them, but you can use felt or cloth or anything that doesn't fray. You can just cut out circles of whatever colors you have, and you can just hand stitch them on by doing a whip stitch around the edges or a blanket stitch or whatever else, you know, floats your boat. But I was just playing around with buttons, so I just took a pin and pinned the buttons on whatever I thought was cute, pretty, or whatever floated my boat. I went through a lot of buttons and a lot of combinations to make sure that I had something that I thought was relatively cute. Alright, so now it's time to sew on the button eyeballs. So I'm getting my thread ready and running my hands through the thread, and there I go. So I'm now sewing on the buttons for the eyes, and for this particular monkey he has a big black button with two smaller red buttons on top. And so I stitched through, and then I'm wrapping my thread around it. So I wrap it around it and then put the thread with the needle through the loop and pull it tight, and then I take it and run it through to the back of the ear, to where the ear seam is, where the ear attaches to the body, and then I pull it through there, so that way, you know, you don't have any loose threads that'll come loose. And then I do a couple of back stitches and let it go.
And there we go. All the sock monkeys are done. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and just a reminder that my next video is going to be about aprons, and that'll be out next week. And also anything that you found in my video, my sewing machine, my needles, my pins, whatever I typically use in my videos, you can always check out the description box below for any type of links to my Amazon links. If you happen to click on those links and purchase something through that link, I get a little commission off of it, and it certainly helps me to be able to afford more supplies to continue making stuff for you guys, and I would certainly appreciate the help. Always remember that if you like this video, throw up that thumbs up or leave a comment below, and I will certainly try to get back with you and respond to any comments that I get. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. And we're going to be talking about aprons here. Oh, so pretty. And then there's this one. Oh, I like that one too. So those are going to be my aprons for next week, and I'll see you next week.